Take one.
My name is Leonard Celaya. I was born in Maywood, California, which is within the city limits of Los Angeles. Lived downtown off of Mission Avenue between First and the freeway. My dad was born in Sonora, Mexico. Came across as a young man with his family. Worked in the fields, the orange groves. Met my mom. She was from Redlands, California. They got married. He was 29, she was 21. His brothers were all in the business of grocery stores. His one brother was there on mission. His other brother had one near Chinatown, and the other one had one near Broadway. When we went to war with Japan, the president made sure that all the Japanese, whether they were citizens or not, they were put into those internment camps, and therefore all the Japanese that had businesses had to sell them. And my dad happened to hear about it, so my dad got some money and bought the business and called it Oliver's Market, on the corner of Hewitt and Traction underneath the American Hotel. And that time, if you looked in the area, they were all apartment buildings. There's no factories, no warehouses. So the business was boxes out front where you had the vegetables and you had the little cooler for the sodas, and he sold meat and groceries and bread. Then as the area changed and they started tearing down the apartment buildings and putting in warehouses because people were moving outside the city, coming into LA to work, he had to adapt. So he went from a market and turned it into a deli, and he made sandwiches, and he had cigarettes and beer and soda. When I was younger, we were always there helping, stocking, putting sodas in the machine. I always used to get in trouble because the front counter was all glass, and that's where all the candy was. When my mom wasn't looking, or my dad, my brother and I would grab one and go outside and split it. And when you had free time, when I was not in school, my brother and I roamed the neighborhood. You would become adventurers. You start going down alleyways and you start looking at old buildings. And I remember I'd go into the hotel, I could run up and down the stairs, make a lot of noise, and come back out. In the 60s, I happened to get a hold of some M80 firecrackers. So I thought I'd be cute, and I lit one of those, and outside my dad's store, there was a big drain gutter. So I threw it down there, and when it went off, the sound just traveled up all the pipes. People from the hotel were running outside. George from the hotel came down and said, there was a bomb went off. So everybody was running, and I was laughing so hard. But what's interesting was cockroaches. I have never seen the size of these cockroaches that came out. They were probably 12 inches long, and they were silver, and they were just coming out of that gutter and just going. Right next to the hotel, there was a vacant field. So the hotel was there just by itself. And on the other side on Hewitt was Al's Bar. There was a lot of activity down below. My dad had a hat business called Belmont Hat Company, and he used to make auxiliary hats for the American Legion. He used to have a metal bald head that he used to shape the hats on with heat. And my mom got into the real estate business. She purchased the hotel. Prior to that, she had bought the house in San Marino, and then she went on to buy other houses that she flipped and sold. On 3rd and Traction, there was a 76 gas station. I worked in that when I was younger. On the triangular lot was Arco gas station, and they compete. I remember working for Union Oil in summertime in the 60s for a part-time job. You had to clean the windows, check the hood, check the tires, and to do oil changes and so forth. And it was a good job. Ray, we used to call him Barney. He was one of the people in the hotel, and he always come down, and you know, my dad used to have a gift for gab, and they would always talk, and Barney used to be a boxer when he was younger. So when we had the fights on, we'd talk about the boxers and who he fought, and he had golden gloves that he had acquired because he was that good. And he'd tell me about he used to wear the zoo suits when he made some money boxing, and they would always have this clash between this other gang of theirs. And I guess boxing kind of hampered his ability to remember things because he'd bounce back and forth. But he'd always have a beer, you know, we'd talk, and he was always like around the neighborhood. He knew everybody. Now, George used to run the hotel. The only time I used to get involved with him was when he'd come down and look for my mom or my dad, and he'd say, yes, so-and-so hasn't paid the rent yet. What do you want me to do? I guess for my parents, he took care of the hotel. He wasn't quiet, okay? He was very energetic, I would call it. I mean, he could never stand still for a minute. And he always wore his collar up. That was his style. Now there's another gentleman. His name was Johnny, but he lived in the hotel. He would come down during rush hour, we call it, when people would get out from working and come in and get their hamburgers, sandwiches, whatever. And he'd be at the back of the store watching to see if anybody would shoplift, because we always have long lines in and out of the store. He just did that because he just liked doing it. People wouldn't steal from us. During the Vietnam War, I was going to Pasadena City College, met a gal there, got married, went to work for Crocker Bank. I had all 3 exemptions not to go into the service. And they said, well, guess what? Tough. So I went in, I enlisted. When I came out in 1969, I didn't have a job. So my folks put me at Al's Bar to get me situated. It was a dive. It was dark and I needed a little life to it. So that bamboo sheeting that you can buy rolled up and put it all around the walls and then painted the rest of the wall blue and the ceiling blue so you thought you were in Hawaii. And then I contacted the Budweiser company and they came out and gave me the knickknacks to put on the wall. If they have peanuts, they drink more beer. Free popcorn, they drink more beer. At that time, you had to go to the L.A. Nut Company and you buy these big bags for like $5. I hired a waitress to bring in the evening crowd after work, which helped for a while. I had all guys, no women, but all guys. Factory workers. You had Coca-Cola down at the end of the street. A couple blocks away, you had Pillsbury. And they used to come in and have a beer after work. Or they would bring their lunch in and they have a beer. That was their kind of meeting place. And a lot of them were sports fans. We'd have the games on. So there was a place for them to come and relax. And then we had the pool table redone. And it was one of those you put a quarter in. All the guys would come in and challenge me to a pool game for a beer. And so you had to learn how to play pool. You knew which ones you'd let win and which ones you wouldn't let win. Some were your good customers. And you'd let them win so they could get a free beer and tell their friends. And then you pick up business that way. I was going through another divorce. And then my dad decided he wanted to retire. So I said, okay, I'll run his market for him. That way I could live in the back until I was able to pay all my debts from the divorce and have enough money to get an apartment and move out. You had to open up at 6 a.m. and you closed at 6 p.m. An Italian bakery in Chinatown is where we got our bread from. The donuts were delivered to us. When everybody was getting out of work and the truck drivers on their way back to the warehouse, if they didn't go to Al's Bar, they came in and bought a beer and sat outside. I always felt secure because I had all these people that would come in the evening. And I ran it from 72 until 77. I told my folks, I got to leave, so they got hold of my brother Hilbie. He came in and took it over while I went into the Postal Service. My oldest brother was Hilbert. Everybody called him Hilbie. He was 2 years older than I was. When we were growing up, he was always the mischievous one. Mom's favorite, so he got away with murder. I had to carry the workload for the both of us. As we grew up, especially when we got into high school, all the girls just loved him. Probably without him, I would have never met any girls at the high school because they always go, oh, you're Hilbie's brother. Hi, I'm so-and-so. Can I come over to your house? And I always figured it was not to see me, but to see my brother. He was always laid back. He used to go and everybody loved him. He was in all the cliques and all the car clubs. My brother wasn't real savvy with business. My dad and my mom would always have to check up on him to make sure he paid the bills, make sure he ordered. I don't know if I should tell you, but he was a bookie. He worked as a bookie on the side. If you ever saw him in the store, he was always reading the sports section or the race newspaper. That was where his attention was. My parents bought the cafe on the corner. My mom said, okay, Hilbie, we're going to give this to you to run. And then Hilbie took it and called it Hilbie's Cafe. People liked him because he was generous with his personality and he fit well in that area because people would come to him and talk to him and he would know about them or his business or he'd give them a chance. He wasn't there to make a buck, technically. He was there to survive. But he liked people, and if he could help them, he would. My dad was real sociable, but when it came to a penny, it was a penny. Pennies make dollars. I remember that. And then, of course, my brother's cafe went out of business. He got cancer. Couldn't handle it anymore, so he had to get out. And he passed away in 2000. I think he was 58. He was too young to die. And after that, my dad started going downhill. Your children are supposed to outlive the parents, and when it doesn't, you can really see the impact on the parents. My dad changed after that. When my brother owned the restaurant, Hilbie's Cafe, is when the word got out and they started talking about that area being some kind of a artsy place for artists. They were renting out some of the warehouses for lofts and studios and so forth. Seeing the changes come with the buildings and strange things that were happening, like putting an airplane on the side of the American Hotel. And that's when I started noticing the changes in the neighborhood. The total area has changed to where now it's more of tourism. You see people walking around and looking at the strange artwork on the buildings and different stores and restaurants. And I hope it revitalizes that area back to where LA has a place where people can go, yeah, let's go down there. Because our places we used to go to was Alvera Street or Union Station, Little Tokyo. Let me tell you about Little Tokyo when I was old enough to drink. Some of those bars were like being in Japan. They didn't have doors, they had curtains. And they would serve you sake. People spoke Japanese. It was like you were in a different world. My dad passed away in 2006, and he almost reached his 95th birthday. And then, of course, my mom followed in 2009, 89. You come across this as your dream, you work, you get a business, you become a citizen, and you raise a family and live in a nice neighborhood. And that was their goal, is to have the American dream, but they had to be real frugal with their money to get that. Because of that business, my dad created a family, and everybody was there to make a life.
Okay.